Hey everyone, welcome to Reddit Readout. Today we are checking out ProRevenge. Story 1. Be abusive to employees, say bye-bye to your job. My former boss was, simply put, an absolute fucking asshole. He was the type of person that had the ability to be so condescending while acting as if he was doing you a favor. His condescending attitude was sometimes downright abusive, and he seemed to have a particular problem with all of the female employees. He acted as if they were dumb and needed assistance with every step. He loves to scream at people regardless of how little their mistake was, if there even was one. He was a slave driver and expected everyone to sacrifice their own personal lives for their job. The thing that sparked this revenge was him telling me to miss my older sister's birthday to come into work on a day that I already booked off. No one liked him. Me and all of my colleagues in the department, around 10 or so, couldn't stand him being here anymore. So we did the protocol. All of us piled together the evidence we had of him not sticking to booked-off holiday schedules, having inappropriate and sometimes abusive language, and we brought it all on one Google Doc. This was step 1. Step 2 was getting a cherry on top. We did this by getting him to do one of his screaming tantrums at one of us. We wanted this to be as damning as possible, and the youngest and smallest girl out of all of us volunteered to be the bait. She made an intentional beginner's mistake in her paperwork, something bound to get her roared at. And the idiot took the bait. You see, he likes to do his scoldings in front of all of us to prove a point or rule by fear, as he called it. This gave us the perfect opportunity to film it from behind our desks and add it to the Google Doc. Now you see, in our company there's this really not well-made email system. You can send an email to an entire department, and I mean entire, as long as you have its name and manager's name. But the thing about this was the fact that all of this information was completely and freely given to employees. This means that a person could send whatever email they want to the entire company, including the CEO. So one morning at 10 a.m., to ensure that as many people would be working as possible, we made a burner email and sent the Google Doc through an email to everyone in the company. It took a little while as there were many departments to get through, but we got there in the end. We gave the email the subject, boss's name, vital information, branch name, department name. Of course our boss received the email as well, and you could basically hear the clutter from his office, as people all over the company were contacting him to ask him what the hell this was about. HR did a light investigation into him and took heavy disciplinary action. As far as I know, he wasn't directly fired, but instead he resigned. And a month after that we never saw him again, and he was replaced by a new guy who was also an asshole, but just less of one. His expressions during the whole ordeal helped me sleep at night. Story 2. Keeping me up at night with your parties. Enjoy being shamed on the national news. In September of 2020, the apartment next to mine was let out to 2 young women, both students. After they settled in a bit, it turned out they wanted to have a party. No big deal, except Belgium was in full lockdown at this point due to COVID, and you were supposed to only have one fixed visitor over. But then again, to be young again, etc., so I didn't really care. During this time, I was working in healthcare. I work with the mentally disabled, but I volunteered for the ad hoc COVID team, meaning I got called upon to tend to those residents who were sick and needed quarantining, or were effectively diagnosed with COVID. This meant pretty long working hours, and I spend about 10 to 11 hours a day at work, with a full hour bike ride to and from work. Needless to say, I was pretty tired pretty much all the time. So I wasn't looking forward to the noise from a party, but I'm pretty chill and know that living in the city, some noise is to be expected. So they are having their party, and I can stand some noise and music. But this party was fucking wild. People shouting full on, in the hallway. Wrecking things, etc., etc. At about 4 in the morning, I introduced myself to the neighbors and asked them when they could expect their company, plus 20 people, to leave. And if they could refrain from having a party the next day, as I have to work and get up at 6 every day. So they promised they would keep it down the rest of TE night. They didn't, and that they wouldn't have a party the next day. Plot twist, they did have another party. And then did another one the day after. At this point, I had been going a full 3 nights without sleep and was nearing neurosis. Every night I had talked to the girls and every night they would be full of apologies and stuff, but nothing would change. I also felt terrible when I had to enter their place, because it would be absolutely packed with people and I work with some very vulnerable people at work who I wouldn't want to spread COVID to. This was pre-tests, pre-vaccines, pre-much of the knowledge we now have about COVID. Luckily the weekend came and they went to their parents and I could recover a bit. Suffice to say, I wasn't really liking my new neighbors. During the next few weeks, they refrained from big parties, but they would have a constant flood of people coming over during the night. And by constant, I mean constant. Like their bell would ring 70 times a night and people would always be coming or going. And those people would be drunk and loud. Our communal hallway is pretty much an echo chamber because it's all stone and any noise will travel throughout the building. Basically I couldn't rely to sleep at night. It drove me crazy. I could only sleep Friday through Sunday, because then they would go off to their parents or whatever. I couldn't grasp how they could know this many people that would always be coming and going. During one night, while knocking on their door to complain about the noise, I encountered my upstairs neighbor, who is also on Reddit, hi, and decided that we would have to join forces to get this to stop. My neighbor told me some important bit of information. The reason there were people coming and going all the time was because they used their apartment as a makeshift bar/hangout. During this time, bars were closed due to COVID and all those students were using the big apartment to hang out. Moreover, across the street was another frat house with 5 boys living there, and that too was a secret hangout. So people would hang out at those 2 places and cross the street if they wanted a different atmosphere or wanted to see their other friends etc. etc. And the boys from across the street would also come over 15 times a night. Most visitors seemed to be law students or affiliated with them. Basically our communal hallway was just a part of their CAF space now. So we tried talking to the girls. Then we started to talk to the visitors. None of them had any sympathy for us when we were asking them to be quiet at 4 in the morning. Most of them just laughed at us, as we were the pesky neighbors no doubt. Even more of them were just so wasted that they didn't know what they were doing. So we started calling the police, dozens of times. Most of the times, they weren't let in and police told us they couldn't do anything. We kept calling as we wanted a record of our calls in the system. Belgium was still in full lockdown at this point and what they were doing was full-on illegal. Even so, police told us their hands were tied if they wouldn't open the door. When the police couldn't help, I turned to the next best thing. I'm a social worker and so I have no problems looking up information and calling around to look for help. This is what I did. Most places, student unions, police, town hall, were understanding but couldn't really do much. So I acted on the suggestion of the upstairs neighbor and contacted one of the girls' dean. I shot him a nice email about sorry to have bothered him and taking up his time, but I had this big group of students from his faculty ganging up every night and maybe he wanted to know about it since they were breaking every possible COVID rule that existed at that time. Especially since me and my neighbor were about to go to the papers with this story, as secret lockdown parties were becoming a thing in the papers at this point. This dean called me back right away and we had a nice talk about our problems. He told me he was on it. So basically what he did was call the law student girl, and her parents. Big drama ensued and we finally got to sit down with the girls and they finally sounded like they were sorry. Tears were shed, for which I had no patience tbh. We learned that the police had actually been inside a few times and they were issued tickets for having secret parties. Those were €300 each a pop, so no idea why they didn't just stop. We learned they were not happy because the dean had called them up at 11 o'clock and they were still asleep. To which I said, well, there is your problem. You are still asleep at 11 o'clock. I'm up at 6 every day and you girls haven't been a bit understanding about that. So we got to feel a bit like we got our revenge and we got to vent, but we kept it kinda nice and parted in good terms, hoping that this would been it and we could live together as nice neighbors. But if that were the case, I wouldn't be here, right? You'd think they would have gotten the point now, and would refrain from making noise and partying. Well, you'd be wrong. Basically what they did was they moved to the frat house across the street and started partying there. There were slightly less people running to and fro, but the noise was still a problem and we were now in the middle of the second COVID wave and these people were meeting up with big groups like crazy, while I hadn't seen a soul in almost a year. Never mind the people at my work, who were forbidden from even going to their own friggin' family. The whole thing was just ridiculous. My upstairs neighbor happened to film such a party across the street and had sent the clip to me. We were thinking about going to the press with our story but weren't really sure if it would be a good idea. So I posted the clip of the party on the subreddit of our country to test the waters. It got quite some. Story 3. Terrorize my family, enjoy losing everything and going back to jail. Wife douchebag entitled woman 2. Hello, this is a long post so buckle up for the ride. Myself and my wife had just had our second child and moved into a duplex in an amazing neighborhood, had its own playground even. We moved in and greeted the neighbors, bunch of younger people but they seemed okay. The first day after moving in we find that they're gone and they're left their 7-year-old, on a school day, outside our door with a bag of goldfish and a note asking us to watch him while they went out. QCPS call number 1. The neighbors and me got along really well. Old guy next door repaired bikes for a hobby and the next door neighbor did woodworking and would always come over to see the kids and sent his grandkids over to play too. They warned us that our upstairs neighbors were trouble, constant traffic going in and out and parties every single night. This was 110% the truth. It got to the point we couldn't sleep at night and we had multiple altercations to the point it was full-blown yelling matches. The landlord was useless and would do nothing to get rid of them so I bided my time. Eventually one night they came home in their red Mazda 3 and it was destroyed. They must have hit someone and ran, so I called the RCMP to let them know as at the very least I figured they'd get in deep shit but oh man I had no idea what I had just unleashed. Turns out the douchebag had a warrant out for his arrest for drug trafficking. He got hauled away in cuffs that night and entitled woman 2 got a visit from CPS again as they left their son home alone again. This wasn't once or twice, it was every single day. So my wife went digging for names and found the mother on Facebook. Using public record searches we found out that they owed Easy Home nearly $48K in assets as they had taken off from the original address with all of their furniture including TVs and a huge sound system. 48 hours later the sheriff was there with a box truck emptying their house. Took the beds, couches, TVs, the annoying subwoofer system, kitchen set and even the dressers. CPS came shortly after and removed the child from the house. I didn't enjoy seeing him taken away but they never fed him and he was always in the same clothing and it was falling apart. We went out of our way to make sure he had full meals when we could not gonna let a kid starve. The douchebag went to jail for drug possession. He was out on bail and hid the drugs in a dresser they took. Entitled woman 1 went to jail for assaulting the sheriff and entitled woman 2 actually had a happy ending. Far as I know after she lost her son she went through multiple programs to clean herself up and started working to provide for her son. Ran into her a couple years ago and she thanked me for what I did. I got pro-revenge on the drug dealer and his girlfriend and thankfully helped someone get on the right path. That's all for today. Please don't forget to like and subscribe.